Let's dive in. I mean, this is a topic that you were excited to talk about,
Yeah.
but I also think given what's happening in Israel and Palestine, it has some urgency because a lot of what I'm seeing is people's anxiety about speaking up about how they feel and what they feel they need from
Mhm.
colleagues, social media, right? I mean, I deleted Instagram from my phone
Mm.
yesterday. I felt it was just the discourse was
Mhm.
so. I think there's a lot of resonance um, around the idea of how to speak up and when and why and effectively.
Yeah, I proposed this topic more, as you probably remember, because I was thinking about, what do I generally hear a lot from clients, and what's kind of under the surface in terms of a challenge that comes up. And this shows up a lot in assertiveness, in when you feel like you've been wronged by somebody at work or things like that. But since we scheduled this, and as you saw with the events in Israel, it's like you're so right. There's a whole layer of this around speaking up around needs, and kind of broaching topics that people don't really want to talk about, but are really creating the climate for healthy work relationships, or maybe getting in the way of them. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's such a challenging time, I think, to know when to how to operate, how to speak about things, but also you don't want to be too silent,
Mhm.
uh, because when you don't say anything, it really does send a message also about whether you care enough, right?
Right, and it's become. Uh, I have had friends on social media, and I have seen posts from them that have said, like, "I expect you to speak up right now. If you don't speak up, I judge that."
Mm,
Which I don't know. I have feelings about that.
yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
I don't want to derail us from our like practical and helpful topic, but I don't think that anybody has a responsibility to speak up on social media if they're not directly involved in a situation because social media is tricky.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I also think that there's a layer of obligation that is in that
Mm.
kind of request or that demand that somebody's making, and I think that's not really fair in general. It's almost kind of making you have to say something when you're not quite ready, or don't say this, don't say that, and that doesn't feel inclusive.
Yeah.
So
So, okay, so tell us what's the questions that you hear from your clients around
yeah,
this topic?
I think it's how do I speak up in a way that doesn't create more conflict? Uh,
Mm.
how do I say something that really about something that bothered me, but I don't want it to, I don't want them to retaliate or make me look as if I'm being sensitive. That comes up a lot. By the way, also hierarchically, this comes up. So, what if my boss is acting a certain way? How do I speak up around that? And it really is in degrees. Obviously, on the one extreme, you can see things that are super inappropriate, that things happen at work and you have to speak up. And then on the more kind of benign area, it might be something as simple as, hey boss, kind of back up a little bit and let me kind of have some empowerment here. you know uh, I have a few of those examples where leaders want to lead, but they're kind of being micromanaged not to. So things like that.
Oh, tell us about that. And listeners, if you have a question around speaking up, how to do it, please throw it in the comments. But yeah, let's dive into that. How?
Yeah. Wow. I wish I had the silver bullet on that, but I think first off, the one thing I always say is understand that you have the right to assert yourself. That I think that at the very core of it, a lot of us, I think, are wrapped up in, do I even have the right to say this? You might think a lot about what this will mean for my future or to other person, but that kind of clouds a little bit of the core value that you should have for yourself around what to say.
Mm.
I think then the piece of it, and this is one thing I struggle with a lot too, is the conventional wisdom would say, make sure you are emotionally stable. Don't go into it angry. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. But I also think that sometimes it's impractical, to to really in the moment to have a witty comeback. It's just not the thing that a lot of people can do, especially when you're like surprised by how somebody's treating you or saying something. So I think knowing what your triggers are can be really helpful. Knowing what might be the things that make you feel more sensitive. And then I think it's the idea that try not to let it linger without
Mhm.
addressing it, because that really can make it worse. At some point, we can almost start thinking about things that they didn't even do or say, but lump it into the reality of it because we haven't said anything and we're building our own narrative in our head.
My friend Christine calls that festering.
Oh
When
yeah,
you
that's
just let
great.
when you let something a conversation that you want to have, but you're scared to have or you won't have, and you don't have it and it festers.
Yes.
I think that emotions and anger can be very strategic.
Hmm.
And so back to your point of you're supposed to be cool as a cucumber when you're talking about something difficult. I've never really bought that,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I may be wrong.
No, I agree. I mean, I think some people are wired in different ways. I'm actually watching the Beckham documentary right now on Netflix. David
Oh,
Beckham,
oh,
yeah, really, really good. And I think most people that ever follow David Beckham would be like, that guy's cool as a cucumber. He is always just chill.
yeah.
And there's a few moments back in the '90s when he really was the enemy of his people because of a penalty that he got in the World Cup, um, and sometimes you look at him and you think, how is it possible for somebody to be that cool? And for 20 years or so, he did say, he's like, I hurt inside, but I never talked about it until even filming this documentary. I think some people are just wired like that. I'm not. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I grew up in a family that did that. We all were just very kind of vocal and visible when we were upset. So I think, every now and then I would find myself wishing that I had a little bit of that training in a family that was different, but it is what it is. I think the one thing that I have learned though is, again, personalizing for myself what my triggers are and being okay with it. So
Hmm.
for instance, if I feel like, hey, I know this is going to bother me, a moment where I feel like I need to assert myself, I've recognized that taking a day really helps me. You know, I can always come back to it tomorrow. I don't need to be so trigger happy right now. Or for instance, I think another thing that I think a lot of leaders fall, or managers, employees fall into is sometimes we think we could just email people about it. Like email is a nice, like, safe way to just get it all out there. And that's just the worst thing to do.
Email is the worst.
Yeah. I mean, it's there forever. It's like you do it and you feel good, but then you're wondering, are they going to respond? And that they didn't respond, you're thinking, did I say too much? Having that conversation is so important, even though that's obviously more high stakes and can be a little bit nerve wracking.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think for me, I have a challenge speaking up um, in the moment. And so I will sort of blank in the moment and then afterwards know everything I want to say. And then
Yeah.
my husband and I, when we fight, I will send him text messages after the fact. And that's terrible. Like that is, I mean, right. That is really not good practice. And I've done that at work in a little way too. So how are you strategic about speaking up? Is it about preparation? Is it about using time? What's the cadence of doing it well?
So I've always find that if I can put myself in the other person's shoes, it does clarify things a little bit better. That doesn't mean that I need to necessarily agree with them.
Mm,
Um, but I try to think of it like, how would this person feel getting an email right now from me? Are they going to even listen to it? Are they going to find a reason to just be like, wow, now I don't even like this person at all?
right. They're just angry.
Yeah, they're just angry. So it's like I try to separate the substance from the medium, and try to think about it like, again, what's the easiest, simplest way to get on the attentiveness of this person, as opposed to just trying to vent for my own purposes. Is this for me or is this really for them?
Mm,
And I do think that, by the way, venting is important. Like, you don't have to run to the solution or like compromise or negotiation immediately. I think it's important to process it ourselves. And sometimes you can't do it on your own. Like it does help to talk to your spouse or talk to a trusted person first and get it out. You might say, hey, this happened to me. And can you believe this person did this and this and that? And hopefully you'll have friends that will actually, understand that instead of saying, well, you shouldn't have said this. But it's like, once you process that out a little bit, I think that can de-escalate a little bit in terms of how you present the message.
Yeah.
And then strategically, to your point, I think the idea is also to make sure you go into that conversation with a game plan. It's not really productive to just make it a lot about, let me just go and dump everything that I felt on you now that we're talking.
Right.
Because again, you want to think about not just what you're saying, but how it's going to be heard.
It can't just be, well, so what I'm hearing is, don't make the intended party of your difficult conversation your first port of call.
Right.
Get it out there, vent, workshop it to your dog, to your therapist, to your partner, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Because then you learn also.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then don't just make it about your feelings.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to a lot of the things you and I have spoken about with anxiety and how the mind kind of, you can't believe everything your mind tells you. Right. And so your mind is going to send signals that you're being threatened right now by this moment. Can you observe that for a little bit and not feel as if, you're not allowed to respond? You are allowed to respond, but just know that you might be kind of diminishing your case if you don't manage it the right way.
Yeah.
There's a comment actually that just came up.
Yes, Ashley, let's put your comment on the screen. Gender differences. Yes. Thoughts around this?
Yeah.
I'll read it for the podcast. Can you talk a little bit about gender differences when speaking up? I see many times when women speak up in meetings, when they say qualifying statements like, can I interrupt? Or do you mind if I share? Whereas men, they just take over the air and share their point.
Yeah, I think that's true, and so at the risk of generalizing here, I would say that it's true that I think women do that. Not all women, I would say, do that. I've worked with women who are pretty assertive in the moment too. But I don't know that that's necessarily wrong to say, can I interrupt? Do you mind if I share? I go back to, it's a weird analogy, but like Seth Godin talks about permission marketing. It's like, instead of just bombarding people with marketing stuff, you can ask them, can I send you a newsletter? Can I think that really is a nice way to inoculate yourself from the feeling of attack. Like you're saying, hey, do you mind if I actually share with you what I'm thinking about? Because again, we're all humans, not all of us want to feel, it's like when you said the earlier example about people expecting you to say something on social media, right? They should really say something. They should first ask you, hey, do you feel like it might be a good idea for you to share something, right? Yeah. Actually appeal to your agency, right? As opposed to do this, do that. So that's just my perspective. And I think men should learn how to do that. It'll be valuable.
I think there's racial differences, right? Sure. There's cultural differences. And so your ability to speak up with ease and have it received is a super probably nuanced and intersectional thing.
Yeah.
Sarah has a question. Having a game plan is a good idea if you're the one who's initiating, but what happens when your approach attacked and you need to respond? That's a great question.
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah. So I can honestly tell you that, I've been on the receiving end, in my culture, I'm Indian American. I was born and raised here, but like my parents from India, I'm sure my brothers and sisters from India might be able to agree with this. We're usually not, conflict ready people. We're not the type of people to say, I'm going to give it right back to you. We're more like a little bit more submissive and, passive in that respect when it comes to conflict. And I found myself in situations like that too, where I would not have the wherewithal to respond when I was attacked or felt, kind of shamed or something like that in a public setting. One of the things that I learned from, I don't know where it was, but sometimes a comeback could just be something like, hey, is everything okay with you? Is everything all right? It's like, you're not even really giving into what they said, but you're kind of mocking them a little bit on like, why would you even say something like that?
Or having empathy. Like if this is someone that you have a relationship with and it's out of character, I think it's totally legit also to be like, whoa, like,
Right. Yeah. Ouch.
yeah,
That's pretty intense. And that's a great point, because then they might also realize that, wow, I was out of line. I didn't realize how that came out. And yeah, a lot of times these are like misunderstandings that get blown out of proportion because of the tone or because of something that was unexpected.
yeah. Um, at the risk of sounding like a total idiot, I go to a nail salon very frequently, and I canceled an appointment with them abruptly, and they were like, "No, you can't have your money back. No."
Oh, wow.
And I kind of became a Karen. Like, it was not okay.
Yeah.
I was having a terrible day, and I called them like 20 minutes after the fact, and I said, "I'm really sorry that I talked to you like that. Like, I
Wow.
understand your policy. I really apologize for that." And this just, I mean, this is, and I felt, but I felt like it was okay because I've been going to see them for years. But I do think that we also have to have grace with people who we
Totally.
do know that we can lose it sometimes. And I was ashamed of my behavior, and very grateful that they heard me out and were like, "It's okay, you can still be
Mm,
our customer." um, so I'm curious also about repair.
mm,
I do a lot of the sort of toxic boss situations that I hear, um, feel very all or nothing. Like, I'm going to speak up, but then it's going
yes.
to be over. Talk about repair.
Oh man, this is a great aspect of it too. So I think resetting work relationships is so critical. I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I do believe in the value of it. It's the idea of like not burning bridges is real. I think the world is small, particularly as you start moving up in your career and you start kind of getting a lot of experience in one industry or in one area of work. People talk, people evaluate you based on what other people said about you, and again, I think just having, like you said, grace for people, or having the ability to see that we're all humans and we all kind of prone to misunderstanding is really important. I think, in fact, if you can remember that relationships can be repaired, they oftentimes actually get better.
Hmm.
So one example I've found this personally, and I've seen this with my clients, is that people act so differently when they're in a work environment with you than outside of work.
Yeah.
And because it's so wrapped up in like your identity of I'm the boss, or more importantly, I'm your peer, and it's my silo, my turf, and there's a lot of feelings of threat around that, or competition. And yet, when one of the people happens to leave for a different company, it's like it never even happened. Like they're friends, everything's
Yep.
great, right? And so it's baffling to me that we would be willing to cut everybody off as soon as there's one little faux pas that happens, right? Instead of saying, actually, let me see if I can address this. Now, if the person doesn't actually want to meet you halfway and really say, like, let's both work in this together, then I think it's great to just give up on it,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, trying to see that there's possibility of making it better. There's an optimism there, I feel, because you can find that actually maybe both of you are thinking, wow, this work environment brought the worst out of us, instead of actually who we really are.
Do you work with people who feel that they need to speak up in meetings more frequently or more powerfully? Any advice there?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So Selena Rizvani, right? I think we're both yeah, LinkedIn top voice. She's a great friend of mine. I believe she has a great piece of advice on this, where one thing is just having some wing men or wing women,
Mm,
around you in the group, right? Actually having a little bit of an arrangement or implicit kind of talk about, hey, when I need to speak up, will you support me? And vice versa, because like there's strength in numbers, and if some person is feeling wronged in a setting, and they're the only one feeling wronged, then yeah, you can feel like I need to like kind of uh, I feel very diminished. But actually, if you have somebody that's able to support you, say, I agree with what so and so was saying, that can be really helpful.
mm.
So that's, again, goes back to the strategic way of creating something. that can help with speaking up. And then I think just in terms of the idea of speaking up on your own, I think like anything else, it takes practice. So getting into a place, a rhythm where, first of all, you are actually speaking more often. I think, I'm the kind of person, I don't know if you feel this way. A lot of introverts I work with, they're super thoughtful in their minds. And so they're not the first people to talk in meetings. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times they'll say, well, I don't want to just I don't want to talk for the sake of talking. I just wait until something needs to be said. But that can make them seem a little bit aloof and not involved. And so if you're somebody who's never really talked before, and then all of a sudden the only time you talk is you're defending yourself or you're attacking somebody, or, it's a little bit weird,
Yeah.
right? So I think getting into the rhythm of actually participating is really important so that you become comfortable with your own voice and people are comfortable with what you're trying to assert. And then when things really happen, you're able to say, hey, listen, back up a little bit, or let's talk about that issue that happened.
I think that's incredible advice. I just want to actually like pull that out a little bit because, there is data that if you're quiet in meetings, just saying anything soon in the meeting, even
Mm-hmm.
like it is a beautiful day,
Mm-hmm.
gives a signal that you're present.
Yeah.
And so to your point, it doesn't seem jarring when all of a sudden you lay in later in the meeting. And when I work with people who are introverted, yes, but more frequently socially anxious,
Yes.
I do really encourage them to sort of get in early in the meeting, even if it's something innocuous and in
Mm-hmm.
the little sort of small talk, which is difficult for a lot of us, especially on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
But just asserting that, like, I'm here, I'm paying attention, so glad that you had a great lunch,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it builds that community.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I saw this. Somebody was talking about body language on Zoom and
Mm.
how to build trust and charisma and things like that. Their particular research had said that you want to show your hands within the first few minutes of a meeting because it just
Yeah.
it just humanizes you and it connects you instead of just looking like this talking head to each other.
Well, also that you're not typing and
Oh
multitasking.
yeah,
So
that's a good.
so I actually use my hands strategically during Zoom meetings,
Okay.
because I want to show people that I am paying attention to them, that I
Yes.
am not, and so I think that, again, this stuff is also new, but
Right.
yeah,
But it reminds me of the same concept, which is you kind of want to make yourself known and memorable early, or like say something that's going to be memorable or do something. Uh, yeah, but because I'm sure you can imagine, right? A lot of meetings, people are still on, not showing their video, and they're just kind of, you're
guilty.
wondering, like, yeah. And in a big team meeting, you're thinking, are these people even on, right? They might be doing their own work and stuff. So,
Right. Or you can
yeah,
hear the clack. I have a client meeting in 2 minutes. So we're going to
yeah,
have to wrap it. I want to ask you one last question. And I want the audience, this is sort of a thoughtful question. A lot of people need help getting in touch with their feelings and the fact that they even want to speak up.
hmm,
That something's, not everyone is like me who has like 8 million emotions a second and wants to share all of them. And so I'm curious what your advice is when you're working with clients to help them get to the place of, you know, I need to speak up about this.
yeah, yeah. So I was just having a conversation with a client last week about, you know, moving from the status quo to like things that are really important. One of which is like work-life balance and being home with the family. Um, and I really believe that until something really unfortunately tragic or really unfortunate happens unexpectedly, it's hard to really understand the gravity of these things.
Hmm.
Until your kids go to college, you won't look back, you won't remember how much you missed because you were at the office until 10 p.m. every day. Um, you don't want to make that mistake. And I think sometimes getting in touch with the fact that there might be some things that you need to be saying to get more of what you need, really just taking some inventory of that. We can kind of tell by even our personal behaviors, or like maybe if we find ourselves snapping at certain people, or if we find ourselves a little bit off in terms of emotions. I think there's always something there that's telling us, or like the body keeps the score kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I think taking that time to really appreciate it is important.
Yeah.
Because again, the other piece of it too is not just speaking up for my own behalf, but speaking up for the behalf of other people who might be victimized or need that voice.
That's exactly
And as a
right.
leader, it's so important to do that, right?
It's so important, right? And I do think tuning into your body, I mean, when I tell people to get in touch with their anxiety, is there a meeting or a person that you're always anxious about
Yes,
the
yes.
night before, the morning of, that your body's telling you something? And so getting in touch with that can help you have this sort of moment of, okay, wow, something's going on here.
Hmm.
Maybe I need to address it. Okay, I'm
That's
going to leave on that note.
right.
Awesome being with you,
Oh, you too, more
and
as always.
see everyone soon. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye bye.